So welcome, everybody. We're thrilled to have you all here. This is actually our first food policy for breakfast series since the pandemic. I was in this room on March 13th, 2020, and right after that, things kind of shut down for a while, right? A bit. We've had other in-person events since then here at the Food Policy Center and at the Silberman campus for Hunter College, but we haven't, we've done virtual panels. So in the spring, or in the fall, I should say, we did a Food as Medicine Summit, which was multi-hours and a bit of, a deep dive into that topic. And today we're really, really thrilled to be exploring the whole urban agriculture space with individuals who are experts, who have been working really diligently, sometimes for decades, right, from the federal level to the state level to the city. So I'm really honored to share the stage today, and I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. My name is Annette Nielsen. I'm here as I lead the Hunter College New York City Food Policy Center here on campus. So, Leslie.
Good morning, everyone.
Is it on?
Good morning. Hello.
Tap it. There you go.
Okay, here we go. Good morning. My name is Leslie Glover II. I am the program manager for the USDA's Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production. And I think the assignment to start off with is what gets us out of bed in the morning. And so for me, I'm a really strong proponent of purpose. Because I believe that purpose really gives meaning to everything. And so for me, my purpose in pursuit in life is to reconnect people to nature and to their food systems. And in particular, communities of color who have been, in a lot of situations, kind of separated from the food system in meaningful ways. And so my whole desire is to try to do that and to make sure that we're using food in the food system in a way that can benefit all of humanity. One of the reasons that I think that the food system is not working the way that it should for all of humanity is because I don't think we're using it for the purpose for which it was intended. And so I'm going to go ahead and get myself in trouble right from the outset and say, right now I think the model that we're using is with food as a profit and as a commodity. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think that we need to really kind of rethink that and use food more to its purpose and use profit as a byproduct. Nothing wrong with making money off of food and the food system, that's all good, but it needs to be a byproduct of purpose and fulfilling the purposes for which it was created. So hopefully we'll get into that a little bit more as we get into the discussion, but just happy to be here. I haven't been to New York a whole lot of times, so I'm really excited to be here and to share with you folks today.
Thank you so much. Blake.
Good morning, everyone. Blake Glover. I'm the State Conservationist for NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, here in New York. Leslie and I are not brothers. We're not cousins. Leslie is Mr. Glover. I'm just Blake. Glad to be here this morning. NRCS in New York has 43 offices around the state. And we're looking to add another office in Brooklyn, New York, in 2024 to tackle some of the urban issues from a conservation standpoint here in New York. And so we're excited about that. NRCS and the Farm Service Agency, FSA, will be in those offices. We're looking forward to working with our partners that are miles ahead of us from a USDA standpoint on urban agriculture in the city. But we're excited to catch up to those guys and be a part of the conversation and be a part of the solution moving forward. What gets me up in the morning? I got two families, right? You got one at home, you got one at work. The family at home outweighs the family at work, but at the same time, it's good to work for an agency that is family. 145, 150 employees here in the state, 11,000 employees across the country, 51 state conservationists or directors around the country, and we all talk, right? And we all bounce ideas off each other and make sure that everyone's okay. That's what family is. And it's not to make a shameless point, but usajobs.com. There's always opportunities to work for an agency like NRCS around the country, including New York. Excited to be here, excited to be a part of the conversation.
Love that pro tip. Thank you. Kiana.
Oh boy. Hi, everybody. Good morning. So excited to be here. Thank you, Annette. It's great to kind of, like you said, be here again in person. And it's so great in January to have the space and opportunity to talk about like urban ag. So thanks just for having me and being here. A little bit about myself. I started my career as a community advocate. What really brought me to the work and that training was my desire, kind of like what Leslie said, to connect folks to quality goods and services. And I've done that in different nonprofit capacities. But there was a window of time when food scarcity and food justice, before I even knew that term, was really on my mind. And being a new mom, and a relatively new mom and a single mom, and having this training at Just Food really opened my eyes to the concepts around food justice, the power that people can have to make those changes, and the connection that we have to like policy, whether it's state, city, or federal. And that really got me into wanting to learn what I can do, but how I could bring the information that felt like it was purposely kept from us in a way that could be practical and learn as I go, and I'm still learning. And over the time, Just Food, I went from a volunteer to a part-time CSA manager, and really had the chance to not just advocate for equitable food and farm policy, but really work with small-scale farmers, in particular urban and rural farmers of color. I've learned that my desire to build impact and connecting people to quality goods and services meant we could do that here. We could do it as locally as possible, and it could be of and by ourselves. So I really got interested in models that were supporting a mission and a budget. So helping folks start and sustain CSAs, making them viable, community-run farmers markets, helping folks connect to being community chefs, and some folks that wanted to dive into policy, doing that as well. And from those opportunities, it gave me a chance to become the executive director of Just Food, which I did for like 3 years. I started my consulting firm, again, with that kind of same knowledge, and really wanting to kind of take the work of food systems and bringing folks into it, but how to operationalize equity. So oftentimes people hear me say that intersection between environmental, racial, and economic equity. For me, it was like, if I started at a nonprofit with intention that I wanted to help folks, whether they were starting their own business or working in government, to how to move that needle so you could still meet a mission and a budget. And then I think that experience helped open the door to when the Office of Urban Agriculture was established at the city level. I was offered the opportunity and unique challenge to be appointed to that role. So we'll talk more about that in here, but what gets me out of the bed, and this is a true answer, what gets me out of bed is my desire and commitment to change, not just the change that I'm able to do myself, but what can I do in this role that can support New Yorkers to really to affect the change that they know is needed in their neighborhoods, how to improve their livelihoods, bring dignity to the work that we have, and build genuine connections to each other.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Brian.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I am just absolutely thrilled to share the stage with all of you here today. And thank you so much, Annette and the Food Policy Center, for having me down today. I say down, I came from Saratoga County this morning. Saw a lot of water, some streams that were just about bank full, if not about to crest. So luckily, though, the weather did change and it stopped raining just south of Albany. But anyway, it was a It was a nice drive down and got to get off the thruway as we were diverted for some time and kind of see some of the rural environment in Orange County, which was quite nice. But again, thank you so much for having me. So I am the Assistant Director for the Division of Land and Water Resources at the Department of Agriculture and Markets for New York State. Within the Division of Land and Water Resources exists the New York State Soil and Water Conservation Committee. It's an agency of the state. We're housed within Ag and Markets. And as a very small agency, Ag and Markets provides just abundance of support to our mission, whether it be legal counsel and fiscal management, and certainly leadership through the Commissioner's Office. It's a very unique position and a unique agency within New York State. The primary function and mission of the Soil and Water Conservation Committee is to support the 58 county soil and water conservation districts in New York State. There are 62 counties in New York State. Leslie's working on his geography in New York.
Yes.
But there are 58 districts. The New York City Soil and Water District combines all 5 boroughs. So it's very large, but a very, in a very important piece in our urban agriculture and green infrastructure here in New York City. And soil and water districts are unique. They're governed by a 5 to 7 member board, so not every district is the same. So when I talk about programs today that districts implement, I'm not speaking on behalf of all districts. And as a state soil and water committee whose mission is to network, guide, and provide programming support to districts, we also don't tell them what to do, right? So, they meet local needs, and they're growing in capacity because those local needs are changing. So our conservation districts really never cease to amaze and surprise us at the state level. We're usually a couple of steps behind, right, in what districts are doing. So urban agriculture is a really great example of that, and a new and exciting one to determine and figure out, how we can be a part of helping and support of the really important venture of urban agriculture. So what gets me up in the morning, really, I was taking note of all of, what gets you out of the bed. And I would say it's very similar. Working for the state as long as I have, in one agency as long as I have, you go day to day and you're wondering, what difference did I make? Right? Did I make a change? It seems like so many days, you're just mired in the paperwork and the bureaucracy, but outcomes and benefit. And, at the end of the day, did I do my part in hopes to, make somebody else's life and lives better? Whether it's agriculture or, water quality, environmental conservation. Knowing that myself and the team are very small, but important part of that gets me up every day. Of course, the coffee pot doesn't help or doesn't hurt either.
We have to have caffeine.
That's
yes.
right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Brian. So, as you can see, we've got a lot of talent up here, a lot of expertise, and we're going to dive into some questions. I'm going to start with you, Leslie. If you could provide a brief overview of your office at the federal level and how your funding that you have supports urban agriculture throughout the country at state and city levels, right? And then, really talk maybe a little granular about your office itself and how it operates day to day, and what other countries, perhaps across the globe, do you look at to show some great models and examples?
Gotcha. Okay, so first I'll talk a little bit about our office. I'll give you some background and to put you in the context, then I'll talk a little bit about how our office functions. I'll also talk about other countries and the models that they have, and then how our office funds at the state and local level. So Blake did an excellent job talking about the NRCS, so I'll give you just a little bit more about the USDA. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the USDA, but the USDA is basically a multinational corporation. It's over 100,000 employees. We have 4,500 offices all over the world. There are 29 different agencies and offices underneath the USDA umbrella. We have about $270 billion worth of outlays per year. So it's a monstrosity. And so our office, the Office of Urban Ag and Innovative Production, just so happens to be the newest office established in the USDA. It was established with the 2018 Farm Bill. And our small little piece of the budget has been less than $10 million for the first couple of years. We were very fortunate to be able to get some additional funding through the American Recovery Plan, so that was really beneficial to our office. But our office is then tucked underneath the Natural Resources Conservation Office, and so that's kind of how we fit into the bigger puzzle. So our office has two major components that we work with. We have financial assistance and we do technical assistance. So starting with the financial assistance piece, we have two programs. We have an urban agriculture and innovative production grant program, and super excited about that program. That is probably our most subscribed program. That program gives grants directly to build capacity for urban agriculture, and we do it all the way from the planning stage all the way through to marketing. So any nonprofit organizations, school districts, K through 12, there are a number of different entities that can apply. But they can use that funding for planning. They can use it for buying, some limited equipment. It can help in some instances with infrastructure, production methodologies, conservation, energy, food loss and waste. It really goes across the whole gambit. So we're really trying to use that particular program to build capacity across the country. The second financial assistance program that we have is the compost and food waste reduction program. That particular program is also very, it's overprescribed, really. We don't have enough money to give to all the people who request it. But that particular program is used to help communities to develop and implement different solutions that they have identified for reducing food loss at the production level, but then also food waste after it gets to market, and trying to really think about how we can really reduce the massive amount of food that we're wasting as a nation and really as a world. And so both of those started out as pilot projects. We're really hopeful that we've shown enough benefit, outcomes, impacts that Congress is going to include that into the next Farm Bill, the 23 Farm Bill. That's we won't get into that right now. So those are our two financial programs. Then our technical assistance program. There are a lot of them. I'll just suffice it to say that Congress has given us a number of different statutory authorities, and we administer those by collaborating with other USDA offices, those other 29 agencies and offices that I talked about. We work with basically every one of them to try to get them to improve their programs for urban and innovative producers. We also work with a number of other federal agencies like the EPA, like the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Education, NASA, really a lot of different ones, and also try to get them to improve their programs as well as market theirs. We have a newsletter that goes out monthly that has a bunch of these different opportunities that we try to bring to the forefront. As Kiana mentioned, we know that oftentimes urban producers in particular either haven't worked directly with the USDA, may have had a bad experience, and they definitely don't know about the thousands of different programs that the USDA has. So we try to do a lot to kind of narrow down the 40 or 50 programs that are really useful for urban and innovative producers. We have an Urban Ag at a Glance document that kind of does that. So that's really kind of the way that we do things. Now, from the USDA perspective, and I'll try not to go too far because there's a lot to it, but from a USDA perspective, the USDA has also a number of programs. I won't get into all of them, but one of the key ways that we do it is to fund states directly through block grants. One of the key programs for urban producers can be the Specialty Block Program, but there are a number of other ones. So for any of you all that are out there that are urban producers here, I would definitely suggest contacting the State Department of Agriculture for New York, because I know they have different programs that can benefit you all. So that's kind of how we're doing the funding thing. In terms of other countries that we've looked at, their models, I mean, of course, there are a number of them. And I'm sorry, Brian. Sorry, Brian. Brian was mentioning that we really try to do things from a local level, right? Even though we've looked at places like Canada, China, Japan, the Netherlands has an awesome innovative production. So does Japan, the United Arab Emirate, Qatar. We've looked at all of these different models, to be honest with you. But we find that the local solutions, the local innovations is where we really want the rubber to meet the road. As you all may or may not know, a lot of USDA statutory authority and laws were written at a time when urban agriculture was not really a thing. And so in order to, so that we don't confuse the picture even more, we try not to put too many constraints on that would cause undesirable consequences down the road. So we really try to allow people at the local level to try to really drive that train.
That was really helpful and a great overview. Thank you. I'm going to go to Blake. So if you could talk a little bit about your role that you have and what are some of the tangible benefits you're witnessing from urban ag space, whether it's climate or, food access, community building, all of those pieces. What stands out for you?
So my role as state conservationist here in New York, along with any other state around the country, is to administer Farm Bill programs. Most folks know the Farm Bill probably from a SNAP standpoint, food access standpoint. But there's a conservation title within that Farm Bill that we receive funding from for producers around the country. We are waiting on that next Farm Bill, and hopefully we can get rolling on that. So, but I think Leslie talked on it a little bit from a urban ag standpoint, making sure our policies are not detrimental to the movement. And also, when we find policies that we know are not working, we need to sit down at the table and make sure we figure those out. Through the USDA secretary, there was a People's Garden initiative that was founded with Secretary Vilsack. And he stood up 17 urban hubs around the country, and New York City being one of those urban hubs. And so with that, there were funds tied to those urban hubs to establish people's gardens around the country. And so here in New York, we received $150,000 to provide to urban gardeners around the city. We have partnered with Just Food Incorporated to administer those funds. We are in the process of making selections. We've already gone through the application process. And so here in the near future, those that have applied will receive notification on that. It allows for us to go beyond what Farm Bill dollars would allow us to do. It allows us to do things such as picnic tables, to chicken coops, to tools and supplies. It allows us to do those sort of things within these funds that Farm Bill program dollars would not allow us to do. And so that is a positive for USDA from the standpoint of trying to get our foot on the ground here in New York and being able to understand what works and what doesn't work. And the authority from the People's Garden Initiative really does work. Those AARP funds allowed us to move forward in that space. Also, from a climate standpoint, in 2021, the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure law, bipartisan infrastructure law, there's so many acronyms and things going on right now, guys. The bipartisan infrastructure law allowed us through the watershed program to target underserved communities. And New York City being one of those underserved communities as a whole, if you look at it holistically, we were allowed to target those gardens that do not have access to water. And it's a big project for an agency like NRCS with 150 employees here in the state, with the support from our national office. It's going to be a big project. But we partnered with Green Thumb. I don't know if anybody from Green Thumb is here today, but we partnered with Green Thumb to Carlos Martinez and his office to be able to provide funding for those farms that do not have access to water. And so and that's only Green Thumb gardens at this point, no private in the Holies at this time. We're only focused on those Green Thumb gardens that do not have access to water. And so there's about 230 or so gardens that are permitted by Green Thumb per the city to operate that do not currently have access to water, but also grow food. That's the sticking point from a USDA NRCS standpoint. They have to grow food. And so right now we're currently working on a watershed plan that will identify some of those climate needs, not only from what USDA would like to see, but what the mayor's office would like to see, along with Agri Markets and other agencies within the city would like to see from a watershed plan standpoint. And that will allow additional funds to flow through at some point once we get that watershed plan done. So we're excited about that moving forward, and hopefully we can get some things moving off the ground here shortly. I know that Green Thumb and their folks are currently working on the watershed plan, and then we'll slowly move towards implementation. Currently, the fund set aside for that is $42 million. That does not cover all the gardens, and so as we get moving forward, we'll look to see if we can add additional funds to that.
Those pieces you're talking about are really important. I mean, I helped start a community garden a long time ago, and having water access was, a barrier at first until we got a tap put in, and just tools, that infrastructure and the incidental piece, right, of all those items that, because you're usually dealing with a lot of people that are coming together as volunteers, right, to do this work. So it's so helpful to have that support on the financial end too. So we're going to head back to Brian, my former colleague, if we will. I used to work for Agri Markets as well. And so, in terms of your work in the department, and, talk a little bit about how your office and your work has an impact on urban agriculture. And then I'd like to segue a little bit, too, to a more topical focus. The governor had the State of the State yesterday, and from what you heard and what you saw as the pillars that she laid out, at least under the agriculture or resources, natural resources, how do you see that having benefit for urban ag?
Wonderful. Well, thank you. So as I said before, I have been working within the Division of Land and Water Resources for quite some time. Although Ag and Markets, as far as a state agency goes, is very small, we have a lot of things going on. So there are other offices and divisions within Ag and Markets that are also administering programs with a significant impact on urban agriculture. And I could just touch on a couple of those as well. But in terms of my office, the Division of Land and Water Resources, really starts with the state's Agricultural Environmental Management, or AIM, framework. And this is a framework that has been in existence for over 20 years that really helps our conservation districts personnel at the local level, NRCS offices as well, to develop a planning structure for farming, for conservation implementation. And it first starts at an inventory level. So, what is the basic type of farm? Is it animal agriculture, non-animal agriculture? What are some of the features of the farm? How many acres? Whether they use nutrients, fertilizers or manure to help growing crops, that kind of thing. Tier 2 is an environmental assessment, and that really points out where there may be some conservation or environmental risks. And ways that we can improve on the situation of the farm through better management and through implementation of practices to reduce that environmental risk. but it also points out where the farm is really doing quite well on their own. Tier 3 is a planning structure, which helps to hone in on those environmental risks that are identified in the Tier 2 assessment, and basically provide the farmer with a number of options and how things could improve, how we could make better use of irrigation, for example, or how we might be able to stave off any potential runoff and soil erosion or soil loss. The farmer gets to decide, really, what would be best for their farm and what practices they would implement. That's Tier 4, practice implementation. Once the practices are in place, and the farmer takes ownership, adopts those practices, we bring it all back home again with Tier 5, which is an evaluation of the farm, really going through that same Tier 2 assessment, but how have things changed? So that AIM structure and that AIM framework, I have to be perfectly honest, was really built out of a significant need to address what's called non-point source water pollution, right? So that's diffuse sources. It's not coming out of the end of the pipe. Clean Water Act did a phenomenal job of cleaning up watersheds throughout the country from the mid-'70s on through the early '90s, realizing that non-point source water pollution was an issue that we really also needed to tackle. So conservation districts, rose up and became local grassroots governmental entities to really address non-point source pollution. Fast forward about 10, 15 years, and although we still have a lot of challenges to address with non-point source pollution, we also recognize that we don't always have to look at the highest priority hotspots, the large acres, the vast amount of cropland that we have in parts of the state like Western New York, Central New York. But we also have to look at smaller scale farms. We have to adapt and tailor that AEM planning framework to address small and in some cases urban farms, because well-managed small-scale urban farm can address all of those same issues that I talked about, being more like green infrastructure, a way to actually prevent some of the urban runoff from flowing into a storm drain and creating a CSO issue or any number of other water quality issues. So we really are kind of at this point really restructuring, looking at our AIM framework and looking at the work of conservation districts a little differently, right? We have the ability now to look beyond the more traditional larger scale agriculture to really hone in on individual different sites. So like I said before, conservation districts often lead the way. So what we're finding out is districts like in Erie County, Buffalo, Onondaga County, Syracuse, Monroe, Rochester, and certainly New York City have already been working with urban agriculture and in community gardens and trying to open up pathways to address those environmental concerns, whether it's water access and certainly soil testing, looking at heavy metals and nutrients, pH, salinity, soil texture, site assistance. So all the things that I'm talking about from a broader rural landscape can really be honed into the urban agricultural landscape as well. And districts, essentially, meet a local need. In some cases, local community organizer or food access, activists might actually then, say, well, geez, don't forget about us in the urban center. And it's awfully hard to get assistance and support without being persistent in your efforts to do so because of how much districts have on their plate. So we've seen community organizers and leaders actually get on district boards and really shake things up, and that's very fun to watch, and move some of the district services into the urban centers, like I said before. And they're doing so with funding that they might have available through the state aid program that we administer. So outside of competitive grants, it is a level of support that the state provides the conservation districts for their operation, and oftentimes leaves funding available for them to run mini grants, micro type grant opportunities, which I think is a sweet spot for a lot of urban agriculture and community gardens, because they can really simplify the process. We love block grants, Leslie, from USDA, because USDA processes can be a little complicated. So essentially through our state aid program, we're block granting funds to districts so that they can cut through the red tape and really provide assistance and support. So like I said, initial consultations, site visits, best management practice implementation following NRCS standards. NRCS did something that's tremendous to us. It's just a matter of course of business. But when you develop the raised bed standard, like all of a sudden, all the considerations you need to have for soil barrier and construction of the raised bed was like all science-based. Follow that standard, and we can help provide implementation funding. And of course, irrigation and supplies and materials, equipment. These are all things that we find out that our conservation districts are providing to local communities, and doing a lot more of it. So what we're doing now is trying to build programming around that. So outside of the state soil and water district aid program that I mentioned, how can we target funds like USDA is through some of our more traditional cost share programs to be able to do more? So we're kind of at that level right now, catching up, learning from districts, what they're doing, and what some of the barriers and challenges they've experienced in working with communities, and of course that what community leaders have experienced, and trying to build and tailor programs accordingly. So I think that it covers probably more than just the question you asked there, Annette, but really just wanted to point out that really does start with a basic structure, and although it was developed for different reasons, we're able to adapt that structure to really hone in on what's important in urban agriculture and community gardens. I do want to also mention, too, the Ag Development Division is doing tremendous work, and they're also leading the way, another division within the department, through the Community Gardens Task Force, and I get to sit on that task force and learn more than what I contribute, and, of course, through the Urban Farms and Community Gardens Grant Program, which has been oversubscribed in its inaugural year of 2023, and as a result, in 2024, funding has significantly increased. So we're really excited also to work with our Ag Development Division, be a part of that success as well, in providing grants to communities for urban agriculture.
Thanks, Brian. And great pointing out the whole template that, has been of good service through the rural side, and how it applies in the urban space as well.
I didn't touch on the state of the state yet, but we will come back to that.
We'll come back to that. Okay, we can do that for sure. So, Kiana, you are in a very new office, just a little over a year old, and the USDA Office of Urban Ag and Innovation is not that old either.
Yep.
But you've been in this space for quite some time, and I just wanted to say congratulations on your appointment to the USDA's Federal Advisory Committee for Urban Agriculture. Let's give a round of applause here.
Thank you.
I think this is such an important thing, and I'd like you to talk a little bit or address how do you benefit from, and engage colleagues representing like the federal and state side, and why are these relationships so important in your role, even though it might be outside of your jurisdiction of the city, right?
Yes, no, I think, yes, it's a great question. And I think having the groundwork that the other panelists offered really gives that kind of context, because what you have been hearing is the different pathways and dissemination of funding, the different programs that are happening at the state and federal level, but the relationships on how the money can flow through, sometimes through block grants where, say, the city can apply directly, but also ways that partners, community-based organizations, nonprofits, for-profits are able to apply directly as well. So you're hearing like how this network kind of moves and works. I see an office, I envision, and what I've been building out and establishing the Office of Urban Agriculture for the city is, one, I have to be grounded in my legal mandate. at the city level. However, with my experience in nonprofit work, in my experience with learning from folks in the field, also my engagement with government leaders and officials, it gives me the chance to actually inform from scratch, from the ground up, if you will, what can be an effective, equitable, and feasible strategy at the city level that this office can support and amplify the breadth of urban ag models, practices, and work, not just in what is already happening in our city and led by other agencies and other departments, but really think about what is innovative in policy, what's innovative in programming, how can an office like a mayor's office be nimble so we don't have, say, a capital line or a city expense line to give out money, but we can engage interagency leaders on what their strategies are and incorporate equity and urban agriculture there. We can, take insight and vision from what's happening at the state and federal level and help inform how the city can apply for those larger grants. And kind of like what you were saying, Brian, not only just look at the big priorities or the top tier 1, tier 2s. I mean, well, I'm using it in a different context, but not just look at the big players, the big guys, the big work, the big issues. Those are all needed. But to me, I'm kind of a both and kind of lady. So to me, I see the mayor's office as an opportunity that while we don't have a direct budget line, we do have the opportunity to be nimble. We do have the opportunity to cajole. We can work with other agency partners on how to be more effective on what grants we're applying for. We're, as a city office, how to work with different agencies to bring and disseminate those funds into new programming. And I think with my past, I try to bring in as well, from the understanding of the breadth of urban ag partners, how can we as a city really kind of think about new pathways beyond just equitable? What is sustainable? And sustainable environmental, but sustainable long-term. So it's not something that is volatile in just one administration, but are we kind of building the framework and a grounding that this is work that can actually be supported, be funded, and think about it and bringing in new funding throughout future administrations. So being in a new office, it gives me the chance to kind of put down that framework and having those relationships at the state and federal level and the great leadership and vision of folks like Commissioner Ball at the state level in Ag and Markets, folks like Blake and Leslie and Brian in NRCS, and then the larger office at the federal. We get a chance, and this is this really pivotal moment to really think about urban agriculture in particular, whether it's city-based here in New York City or rural. How do we actually engage in our rural and urban linkages, and not in just a big demonstrative way, but what are some of the priorities, initiatives that can get done and really get funding projects down to the ground, and maybe in new ways or innovative ways that we haven't really thought about before. I think one of those keys that I find is I haven't worked in the city that long. My office isn't new, so there's a lot that I'm able to push on because it wasn't there before. Not to say there aren't things that push back, but again, it's really kind of leveraging, thinking about how not to be relying on one budget, but really helping folks, organizations, community-based organizations, community gardens, that if there's a better way or a more effective way to navigate policy or programming, how do you know about the various levels of funding, from discretionary funding like Parks Equity funding at the city level to federal funding? Are there ways that an office like ours can help increase awareness of those funding so you know that you can apply and when you can apply? But also, can we take that information that we're hearing from folks, the successes, the barriers, and in our other conversations, if we're applying for bigger grants, how do we inform that in our scope? When we're able to talk at panels like this and with each other at other tables, how do we talk about it in a way that we can really leverage what's happening at the state and federal to really unlock what can be done here at the city? And so for me, that really kind of shines through thinking about new initiatives, thinking about policy work, like helping inform policy, whether that's encouraging new language to help like expand water access to not just green thumb gardens, say for not in the grant that you're talking about, Blake, which is important, but also thinking about, like you said, if in the future to come, are we creating and supporting bills that have language in there that it can actually help the breadth of the other gardens in our community. Because not all of our community gardens, while the majority are in our city or under the Green Thumb Network, not all of them are. And, to me, again, it's thinking about the bigger vision and trying to get policy language down that can actually help the most. So if we're learning from initial pilot programs and work, especially if it can reach the masses, is this the language that can actually help and unlock to future opportunities down the road when that funding comes? I know I want to give like a concrete example because I know it's a little top heavy, but one concrete example I think is farm to school programming. So farm to school is a key priority of my office. There's a lot of reasons why. One, because it is a proven value chain that connects actual local production, harvesting, education, and growing for farmers and distributors. So really supporting a genuine value chain in your region, in your state, connecting stronger in the city. But also it incorporates a way to bring that food and that funding to farmers that need it. So supporting economic viability, supporting their regenerative practices that they're growing. But it also gives the ag education, climate education students. And that is like a really unique key, right? Because you're working with businesses, you're working with the city, right? Because you're working with a large agency like schools, and then you're actually supporting students. So it's this, really unique way to kind of hit a lot of targets. To me, to be really frank, having state or tapping into state and federal funding, again, I collaborate with the Department of Education to apply for state and funding grants around farm to school. And what I saw was the opportunity to reimagine what we were able to do in the city to really kind of connect that. And without that state and federal funding, I frankly wouldn't have been able to bring it back, to build capacity, to build new planning, to bring in new partners to kind of do that work. So kind of being a former nonprofit brain and manager, I'm really always trying to think about how can we better leverage city assets in a way that really puts us in a good position to not just amplify mayoral priorities, and again, that longer term planning, but really put partners, community-based organizations, nonprofit partners in the driver's seat of the work. And with Farm to School, we were able to, at the city level, apply for state and federal grants. One, $8.4 million grant to bring in, purchase locally grown food from producers and small businesses, in particular historically disadvantaged farmers and producers. I was able to work to get the grant and get funding from Farm to School at the USDA level and Ag and Markets, $100,000 each to, again, build that reimagining framework. So with that, we're able to create a new farmer and producer training program, particularly focused on smaller scale socially disadvantaged farmers, using the federal term, to get more local food in the schools, and also support those businesses to gain certifications like New York City MWBE, New York State Grown and Certified. Those are things that we're trying to build into the training. So we're using city food procurement contracts, not the big procurement, not necessarily what's going to be, say, on the school plate, but finding other ways to get to it, like school food bars through education, to get more local food as much as possible and building that pathway. And also giving the chance for smaller farmers to be able to, to access contracts that are usually too big for them. But we're also integrating the ag education in the classroom and out on the farms and in the gardens. I wanted students to be able to work with and learn from farmers, in particular farmers in their community, in particular farmers of color that were representative of the high need schools that we're parlaying and working with in the 5 boroughs, and identified a few schools in the 5 boroughs. So spreading that out equitably. But I wanted students to see that there are farmers that look like them, that find that this work is needed and important, and that this is their livelihood in the rural setting as well as the urban setting. I think there are many students that probably walk by community gardens and never know that it's active and actually accessible to them. And I felt like this was another way to not just do that procurement work, which is important, but this is a way to actually get students at the level where they're learning how to grow in the classroom to see the culturally relevant work and food that's happening in their neighborhood. So this is something they're growing together, but they're also learning from each other, and learning from farmers and having that hands-on experience. And then lastly, using some of that to reframe, how do we identify and improve and reactivate school and learning gardens? So school gardens oftentimes are within the school parameters and often don't have the accessibility, especially during the summer, to students beyond that school, but really also thinking about tapping into like learning gardens, like what we see out in District 22 in Bergen Beach, the great work that Superintendent Beauvais already started years ago. But can we reactivate or reimagine learning gardens in our communities where they can touch multiple schools and have that access? And again, all those opportunities are going to create jobs down the line, some stipends, but it really gives students a chance to really see, it gives farmers a chance to really see that there are ways that the city, the state, and the feds can leverage funds, programming, that can happen. And then bringing it back
And expertise.
And then how can we bring that back to y'all, not just to say you should apply for these grants, but then how do we inform policy that is there for the long term that we can push and advocate for at the city, state, and federal level, like farm to school? So when we talk about the Farm Bill and it feels so big and so vast that you can say, wait, there's stuff in conservation. There's stuff around farm to school. There's stuff around soil. There's stuff around food access that we can and we should be supporting. And I want folks to see that New York City, even in an administration that's going through very tough financial crisis times, this is still a window of opportunity to help inform urban agriculture and equitable food policy from the city up.
That's terrific. Thank you, Kiana. And I'm glad you brought in the farm to school topic. Thank you. We're going to shift over to Blake now. I know you worked a long time in, with tribal communities. And I think, I'd love to hear a little bit, or if you could share with us how that work informs your work with urban agriculture and how you tap into the importance of cultural relevancy across the platforms.
I was trying to figure out how you knew that I worked in tribal land.
And that does her research. No,
Google,
So this agency allows for public servants to be a part of all communities, those that have and those that don't have, right? And I had the opportunity to go out west to Arizona. I started in the Midwest as a student, trainee, moving up through the agency. Another plug, those that are students out there, you can go from being a student to a state director to ultimately the administrator of the agency, which we currently have, Chief Terry Cosby. Started out as a student 42, 45, 50, 60 years ago. A long time ago, right? So that can happen within the agency as NRCS. We are not a regulatory agency. We are doors open, providing service to any and all. And my tribal experience working with tribes such as the Navajo Nation, the Hopi Tribe, the Havasupai Tribe, you name it, out in Arizona. Probably one of the better experiences I ever had as a person, and also as a federal government employee. I'm still searching for that. Not to say that I don't get that fulfillment here in New York, but there's something about helping those that do not have anything. And so, I mean, just from general discussion standpoint, just in urban spaces, especially in New York, there are those that have and those that do not have access to whether that is funding, whether that is access to a farmer's market, you name it, they do not have access. And so I think that's a small fight or a big fight, depending on who you are within New York City. Those that are gardening and farming in New York City space that have access and have good grant writers. Those that do not have access to those grant writers that can apply for those grants, such as USDA. I think that's a big hurdle that I think we as federal and state agencies have to figure out, putting everybody on that same playing field when it comes to access to funds throughout the country. Going from Arizona, where the first people of this great nation that currently in 2024 still do not have access to running water, and still hauling water just to either drink or take a shower or to cook, right? And to go from that to New York, right? And being able to see those differences, being able to understand if you're underserved, you're underserved. No matter where you are, you're underserved. And so from a federal agent standpoint, being able to help those that do not have, and also helping those that have, right? I think that's the whole point. Our doors are open to everybody. Being able to do that in a way in which is beneficial to all is one of those things that keeps me up at night, but also wakes me up in the morning, trying to figure out the best way to provide a service to all.
We're going to do one more quick question. I knew this time was going to fly by too fast, but we're going to do one more question, and then I'm going to let you guys do your whole round robin thing here. But I want to go to Leslie on this one. I'm really excited about these regional food business centers that the USDA has rolled out. When I was working at New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, this was starting to percolate. And I think you have worked on this. These are I've heard it described as 12 mini USDAs across the country, right? So New York State is part of one that has, we have Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Vermont, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think DC is part of that. I don't know. Anyway, but it also brings together NASDA. It brings together Cornell, Buffalo Go Green, the Maine Department of Ag and Markets, or their counterpart. And it seems to me like these are really great opportunities to see how we can better do things, using these valuable resources, whether they be financial or otherwise. So tell me a little bit about how, in the urban ag picture, how would this look? How would we tap into these centers, and what have been discussions that you might have had, if you can share with us that.
Okay. Yeah, great question. So here recently, the USDA, as we have mentioned, just set up 12 new regional business centers. So we actually have already been in consultation with that group, and we are going to be one of the members that help to develop their business builder grants, which are sub-grants that will come from those 12 hubs. So we will obviously be making sure that the language that goes into that business building grant is going to be inclusive of urban and historically underserved producers. So we've already begun that process. Number two, I actually was on the team that helped to select the different groups who got that honor. And so even in that process, we were already making sure that those groups already had a vision for including urban agriculture into the local and regional food systems. So that was already, a part of that process. But the other thing I think about is long term, we are engaged directly with the impact fellows, the food policy impact fellows, who are going to be helping each one of the individual centers. We engage with them. We kick ideas back and forth with them, and they are really in a unique situation because not only are they, many of them are coming from the outside, they're coming from nonprofits, they're coming from business, private industry. So they have that perspective, but then at the same time, since they'll also be now officially working with the federal government, they get an opportunity to actually see the laws. They actually can see the policies and then try to get a better understanding of how those policies can be changed so that we can implement the laws in a way that is equitable and that doesn't break the law. I think that we found that in a lot of cases, when we just talk to the general public, they seem to think that, oh, USDA can just change policy and we can just write checks to people. Nah, it doesn't really work that way. And so we are definitely engaged with the regional food business centers in terms of getting their expertise in how do we tweak those policies in a way that doesn't break the law and that allows us to now spend that money with these urban and also innovative producers. I want to also make sure that I don't leave that part out. We didn't talk a lot about that, but a lot of our resources are urban. They're for community gardeners, but also for all of the ponics, aeroponics, aquaponics, hydroponics, rooftop gardens, vertical production, controlled environment agriculture. Listen, innovation is the thing, particularly when you're in these urban environments. So we definitely have a lot of tools and resources that can be used by innovative producers as well.
I love that. Thank you. I'm really excited to see what comes next with all of it. So to wrap up, I'd like to have, we're going to start with you, Brian, ask a question of one of your fellow panelists, something that you're, really got to hear. What do you want to know?
Oh, okay. Sorry. No, that's quite all right. I took so many notes from all the discussions here, so I'm still kind of looking through those. But Kiana, you had mentioned learning gardens, and I really took special note of that, and wondered if you might either be able to expand on that or talk a little bit about how you might go about doing that in more like, I think you mentioned more of a regional context in a way that's like transcends different schools, school districts. Mm-hmm. I just think that's incredibly important, and even in rural environments in New York State, FFA programs and 4-H and other things may not be what they once were. Mm-hmm. But how do you get school boards and school leaders excited about something like that?
Work in progress. No, I think there are a lot of parents. I think there are a lot of principals and others. Thank you for the question. Folks that work at schools, I think sometimes even some people have that either training and they're really passionate about urban agriculture. We have existing partners in New York City that have been doing ag education in school settings for a long time. I think about Edible Schoolyard. There's an Edible Schoolyard site literally up the block, as well as like others. But one of the things that, again, we identified, or what I wanted to see, is how to actually help call that interest or hone that interest and sustain it in a way that could really demonstrate that the city can support and work with partners to do that. And I think learning gardens, in addition to school gardens, offer that opportunity because of the accessibility that I hope in the vision of learning gardens that we could do in the city. So it doesn't, not everybody's going to have an acre that's just sitting in their neighborhood. It might be smaller in some areas or places, but if it's within a community, it in itself can be a community hub. It in itself can be a place of learning, of growth. And I hope, it's a place for not just nearby students, not just say the class or the classroom that's butting against it or, behind it, but could this actually be an opportunity for ag education for emerging leaders as well? So to me, I'm really always kind of thinking about what can we have in our neighborhoods that is actively doing the work that we know we need. Stormwater mitigation, healthy food production, and giving folks a chance to learn and grow. As much as possible. But how do we continue to expand that into the opportunities of others? So we have like new FFA chapters, sprinkled throughout our school system. We have programs like Ag in the Classroom. So are these also opportunities for students to connect to training, leadership opportunities? Can they begin to see our community gardeners, if they're not familiar, to see them as not just emerging leaders themselves, but peers? And so to me, it was that opportunity of connecting what we historically think is just a school program, or what we have historically limited schoolwork around just school meals, and really think about how we can incorporate learning, production, harvesting, and actual climate stewardship right in our neighborhoods.
That's great.
One quick, does that track from early ages on up, or is there like an age group within schools that you would think would have the best benefit?
No, there's no age limit right now. I think what we're working with initially are the schools that DOE had identified, but my hope is that this is something that is replicable. I wouldn't want to do anything that can only live in one place. So my hope is that this is, I think everybody here would agree that, soil work, hydroponic work, innovation is not monolithic to ag tech, but like if we can connect early ages to learning about their food, their life cycle, connecting it to how they cook, what they grow, that can go from early ages to pre-K and suitable curricula for them all the way up to high school. That would be my goal.
Great, thank you.
Can I just throw in a plug?
Sure.
When we say learning gardens, and I think a lot of times we think of just gardens, in a vision in a future, that would also include food forests. It would also include maybe school food forests. Those are some of the things I'm trying to explore too, but kind of starting with what we know.
Love that.
Funding.
I want to hear more. Okay, Blake, would you like to ask a question?
So, Mr. Glover, I think you sell yourself a little short on what your office provides. I'm curious if you have any success stories off the top of your head from the benefits that your office has supplied throughout the country, not specific to New York City, but just any success stories that you would like to share.
Absolutely. So to start with, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think our People's Garden Initiative is one of the biggest, outside of the financial money that we've given to 275 groups across the nation. But the People's Garden Initiative is really important because it shows that USDA has gotten out of the mindset of just dealing with traditional, conventional agriculture to now we basically opened up the floodgates, and we're saying that we can help all 70 million gardeners and community gardens and botanical gardens. If you like to grow food, if you like to market food, listen, USDA has some type of support that can help you. And so our office really is the one who's responsible for coordinating a lot of these different areas across. But the People's Garden Initiative in particular, I think it's so powerful because not only is it speaking to the people, but also USDA. Because there's a lot of USDA employees that when we say, oh yeah, we're going into urban environments now, they're like, that's not agriculture. We're like, sure it is. And so that alone, just that paradigm shift, and helping, the 100,000 employees in USDA understand that, yeah, we do that, is really important. And then, the other piece with the public is to amplify and applaud the work that's already been done out there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we've known for decades that people have been doing this work, but nobody's, there's nobody at the federal level with pom-poms saying, look at the amazing work that these folks are doing. So that People's Garden Initiative, the big plan for that is to continue to do blogs and highlight all of these different gardens across the nation so people can see, yeah, this work is going on, and it's really critical to people. You know, when you think about agriculture historically with the USDA, it's all about commodities. It's all about the food product. It's primarily about the food product itself. But the work we're doing in urban environments is really about the people.
Yeah.
And so, again, that mindset change is really, I think, the most powerful part of what we're doing.
That's really great. Thank you. Would you like to ask a question?
I do. And so I'm going to go. I was already going to go back to Mr. Glover. So I wanted to know a little bit more about what your plan is for the new urban service centers here in New York. And that's one of the things we're really excited about, too. For the first time, USDA is, well, maybe not for the first time, but in recent history, is putting offices back in cities. It's not just in rural environments. So could you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
All right. So Leslie is right. So this is the first time in NRCS's history that NRCS will be located in New York City. We have dabbled in New York City from the standpoint of trying to provide service, but there's no way for us to provide service like that, just the logistics of getting in New York City and getting out of New York City. And also building that trust. I think, that tribal question I had earlier is when you're dealing with underserved and you're dealing with producers that don't know who the heck you are, you got to build trust. And saying we're from the federal government, we're here to help, doesn't always open those doors, right? And so as time goes on and we are planted here in the city in a way in which our partners are bringing us along, because trust us, we need folks to help us open some of these doors as we move through this space, and looking to the mayor's office and the Parks Department to kind of help us with some of that. But that is the hope, is that we are planted here in New York City in a way in which we can make a difference for all producers, those that are permitted by the city to operate, and those that are privately owned, or nonprofits that have private land that we can support as well. But number one is trust. We got to be here to build that trust, and hopefully in the near future we'll start staffing this office in a way in which we can start to build that trust.
That's great. Thank you. Kiana, do you have a question?
Yes. Well, Leslie took my question to Blake, so luckily I have a number two. After actually hearing everybody, I actually have a question for you, Brian, at the state level, and in particular around soil and soil amendments. Something that I think we've mentioned, this is a really interesting time, a very pivotal time for urban agriculture, in particular in our state and our city. You hear what's coming in different agencies. You're hearing what offices are here. You're seeing us try to figure out ways to work with each other. Like Blake said, build trust. But with the lens of the importance of land security, in particular the work around soil, so many of our partners do work in the medium of soil. So many of us, so many of them are doing work in food production, but I think we also have that lens to climate resiliency. And oftentimes, gardeners and farmers in urban settings aren't seen as climate stewards. So I was curious if there's more information or work around the districts that, the soil districts that are in our 5 boroughs that you might want to share, just to help us, one, for me to hear so I can be more aware as an office how to support and engage, but maybe also for the audience as well.
Sure. Oh, thank you. That's a great question. I appreciate that very much. So I was thinking about ways to answer that question as you were still asking it, but I think in your final comment and context for the question, I think really opened up maybe a missed opportunity from earlier. Soil and water conservation districts, as I said, exist throughout the entire state. And New York City is very unique, and the 5 boroughs combined into one. Their mission really is primarily education and also green infrastructure and stormwater management. They view urban agriculture as green infrastructure in New York City. And the more that strategically placed urban farms and community gardens can flourish, the more potential contaminants that can be mitigated by way of that green infrastructure. And even more importantly, from a climate resilience standpoint, have an area within the city that can actually soak in and absorb the extreme precipitation that we're experiencing just in the last 24 hours, for example. So you might look at one site and may think it's not really going to make that big of a difference, but it really does. Syracuse Save the Rain program is another great example of that. Where they're able to quantify the amount of gallons, millions of gallons of precipitation that otherwise didn't go into that storm drain to create combined sewer overflow and just more to the peak flow and contamination of our state's water resources. So certainly soil, as we think about it, in the rural environment, soil health really is the framework for all else. Same can be true when we're looking at individual smaller sites and combining and collecting the efforts. And rooftops is another example of that, right? So how much water sheds off a roof, even flat ones, right? They all have to drain. And you've all seen just the hundreds of gallons. You stand there for 5 minutes, you've already seen 100 gallons of rainwater, flowing off into the sidewalks and the storm sewers. So, I loved it when Shino Tanakawa, the New York City Soil and Water District manager, came to a committee meeting, I should say virtually came to a committee meeting, Soil and Water Committee meeting back in February 2022, when we had an urban agriculture panel and really started off with that. We view it as green infrastructure in New York City. And of course, Grown and Certified was mentioned earlier. One of the tenets of Grown and Certified is that the farm has to participate in the agricultural environmental management framework, as I discussed earlier. Shino's calling us up and say, Gotham Greens and some of the big rooftop urban farms want to get Grown and Certified. We haven't done AIM yet, so we're working together on how we can adapt our AIM framework to address urban farms, and it was just so exciting. And then that was many years ago to now, and district programs in New York City, certainly leading the way, have been doing so much more in urban agriculture, and it all really does center around their core mission of soil and water conservation and climate resiliency, and really just kind of redefining the way they do work through urban agriculture. Really exciting. And there's other examples of that throughout the state as well. I also wanted to mention soil testing, critical. So the New York City, the Urban Soils Institute by the Soil and Water District is providing valuable services to community gardeners, urban agriculture all throughout the boroughs. It's a model that we're trying to also replicate in different parts of the state, and in a lot of ways they're doing that. Huge shout out and partnership to Olga Vargas and the NRCS soil scientists, because they've got the really cool trace metal detectors that can give you an immediate reading. Cornell Soil Labs and every other soil testing labs are great, don't get me wrong, but to be able to go out there and pinpoint where the hot spots are and then learn how to remediate it through soil amendments or through raised beds and bringing in soil and compost from off-site, I think is a key and critical service that our conservation districts and USDA can continue to support.
Thank you for that, Brian.
Thank you.
I wish we could continue on. There's so much more to talk about. Maybe we need a whole day or a conference. You up for planning one?
I'm always up for something.
Okay, all right. Well, right, that's right. I want to thank you all for attending this really important session today. We're grateful to have these esteemed panelists here with us. I want to thank Itera Kitchen, who provided food for us. They are right across the street. They're a shared use kitchen facility mentoring 50 different food entrepreneurs, which is really cool. They haven't been open that long. And then also Saratoga Water, who provided our water today from upstate New York. If you'd like to stay in the know, maybe many of you already receive it, but our weekly newsletter goes out on Wednesdays. Wednesday morning already went out today, but it's nycfoodpolicy.org is our website. Take a look, sign up. It's free. We'll have more events rolling out as soon as we confirm some dates. We have our 40 under 40 event that happens every spring. It's your chance to nominate yourself or someone else to be honored in an evening that's a lot of fun. Also, we're rolling out a really cool pilot that I'm excited about this spring with our spring term. We are going to, it's called the Smart Pantry. We're working in tandem with John Chin, and he's done a lot of work with us in the past, but it's basically a retrofitted vending machine. We're going to have two of them, one shelf-stable, one refrigerated. And we're going to fill it with really healthful ingredients. Students will have access and anonymity to this, just as they would a food pantry. We're going to have really healthful offerings. We're going to get, farm-sourced, New York State farm-sourced offerings in the refrigerated version, as well as getting some food, I hope, from Itera and their food purveyors. We are also going to bring in fresh greens if we're successful with a container garden. We're starting out on the terrace, which is out on the second floor there. So we're going to have our own urban ag going on here, first time in the campus, I believe. And then we're going to put that in tandem with some cooking classes that we're going to do with students as well as staff, talking about repurposing leftovers, safe food storage, how to plan menus, basically home ec, right? That some of us participated in. I grew up with it. My mom was a home ec teacher many years ago. So I'm excited about that element too, kind of bringing everything full circle. I'm hopeful we'll be able to do some composting in with that as well, to really kind of make this a supported project, sustainable project that we would roll out into even more spaces throughout CUNY down the road if we can. So anyway, stay tuned. We have more to come. Let's give these guys a round of applause. I'm so thrilled. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And thank you all for coming out.